how should we understand the mention of Ur of Chaldeans in the Torah, given that the term Chaldeans is historically associated with southern Babylonia only from the 7th century BC onward? Does this suggest that the Torah, or at least that portion, was written or edited at a much later date?
That's a very good question. First of all, let me begin by saying Ur is not absolutely identified. Some people put Ur in southern Babylon. Others put it north in what is today up towards northern Syria, even an area such as the modern-day town or city of Urfa in Turkey. So Ur is not the center is not absolute. I tend to still stick with southern Babylon. But this is an long-standing argument, and in fact, one scholar, I wrote it down here, actually wrote on this in a book that came out a few years back on the history of Israel, a book called The Old Testament and Archaeology and History, and I wrote a review of this, and Bob Becking wrote, let me see here, Becking affirms, okay. He says that Judaism arose out of the ancient Yahwistic religion only after the conquest of Alexander the Great, and he sees that he bases his argument in part on the fiction of Genesis, especially the first chapters of Genesis, that on the basis of this very point. He says regarding Ur of the Chaldees, Becking writes, this is an obvious anachronism, since the Aramaic-speaking tribe, that is the Chaldeans, only entered the stage of history in the 8th century BC. Yeah, this is now false. This is no longer true. Ron Zadok, a well-known Jewish Assyriological scholar and highly respected, has published a 12th century BC Assyrian text that mentions Chaldeans. We now know this. It came out in the Festschrift for Mordecai Kogan in 2017. I can give you all the specific details. It's in my review of the book I mentioned here, which appears in Old Testament questions.com, my website. And in fact, the editors who responded to me agreed when they did with regards to this point. We no longer can say not that's mentioned early, but Chaldeans only appears in the 8th century. We now know it appears under this king Ashur-Keta Leshir II. Not well known because he only ruled for 2 years or so, but he ruled right at 1100 BC, at the end of the 12th century BC. So that moves our dating of when the Chaldeans appear outside the Bible from the 8th to the end of the 12th. So that's about 400 years earlier than was previously thought. And it shows you how, as more and more discoveries of archaeology, and particularly these sorts of texts, they demonstrate that a lot of assumptions based on the absence of evidence, which is what this is based on, aren't true. And so attempts to falsify the Bible on the basis of saying, well, see, the Chaldeans don't appear outside the Bible, so they don't appear until the 8th century. No, they actually now appear in the 12th century, which is very interesting because if you take a late date for the Exodus, you know that Moses is writing the Exile or whatever, whoever is writing that in the 13th century BC is only writing it maybe 100 years before these tribes are mentioned outside the Bible. And they are mentioned as tribes, established tribes. So the idea that there could be Chaldeans during the time when these texts were being written down and put into place is really important, because it shows, yeah, it could be that the Chaldeans were already back in the time of Abraham 600 years earlier, but it could also be that figures like Moses or other scribes used the term Chaldeans to identify and associate This is the that you're thinking about, the of the Chaldeans. And so I have no trouble at all seeing this as earlier, and I now completely reject, on the basis of the evidence, this is what I would call objectively false, to make a statement that the Chaldeans don't appear until the 8th century BC.